All right, welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. So we have this Robert Kraft and Lee Wang courtroom scenarios going on. Making it a little confusing. It's kind of hard to follow what's going on here. But last week in the Kraft hearing, it was to decide whether or not the examination of the officer, whether or not this evidence is going to be suppressed. And they did direct examination for a number of hours. There he is, Robert Kraft, right now. And cross-examination will commence tomorrow at 1:30. Today at 1:30, however, is the Lee Wang hearing, and that's back to this issue as to whether or not the videos or all the videos or some of the videos are going to be made public because of an Open Public Records Act or whatever the equivalency is there in Florida to release this information. You know, this is a really interesting case here, and I know Captain Paul had some really good insights. I talked to him about it over the weekend, having not only been a tactical operations captain for operations like this, but he was also the head of media when I was in the prosecutor's office. So he's got it from kind of like both angles there, and came up with an insight that I found to be kind of fascinating. But before we get to that, let's take a look at the clip of what occurred in the Robert Kraft hearing of last week. Again, cross-examination will commence tomorrow at 1:30. Okay, that's the Robert Kraft hearing as to whether in the case the video surveillance is going to be thrown out or not thrown out. Again, cross-examination tomorrow on that case. And in the Lee Wang case, which they're going to have a continued hearing on the release of the tapes today, our great Kathy Russin from the Law and Crime Network just told me in my earpiece, guess what? Kraft's lawyers are in that hearing as well, which is what good lawyering is all about. Captain Paul, how many of these operations have you conducted? And what observations do you have about what occurred in this case that we talked about yesterday?
You know, I mean, I've conducted many of these, both as an undercover officer going into these facilities and then later in life be responsible for running the operation. So what you have here is a local strip mall prostitution investigation. We've done them many times. The change that happened here is that Mr. Kraft showed up. Right. So, you know, when these are local stories, they're in the local blotter that, you know, there was an arrest, some people got arrested for soliciting prostitution, maybe a search warrant executed, there's some cash that's seized. That's generally what these kind of operations are. You know, you hear things like, you know, human trafficking, you know, and certainly human trafficking is a you know, a higher level of a crime than the misdemeanor prostitution. But the big thing that happened here was Mr. Kraft showed up, and Mr. Kraft showed up now with his legal team. So a lot of the things that we do in the business that might be okay on a normal day are now going to be challenged significantly, which is what's happening.
Yeah, I think that assessment is, we'll call this now, we have the Smollett deal, Gene Rossi, is now infamous in our lexicon, but we'll call this the Kraft factor. To Captain Paul's point, although I was not a big fan of these operations based upon the amount of resources that were used and the low-level kind of offense that it is and the ultimate result when you had real crimes like murder and rape and gang violence and things like that occurring. But I think Jeff brings up a good point, Gene. What do you think? Usually you get away with it. No defendant wants to be in a courtroom contesting this at trial. It's an embarrassment and humiliation in public. They typically get a deferred plea or a low-level disorderly persons offense, and it goes away until the Kraft factor kicks in. Thoughts?
Yes, it's just like a DWI or a shoplifting case where you have a prominent celebrity. It always raises the stakes. This is the Kraft case at its core is a very unremarkable case. And the only thing that makes it extraordinary is he's a billionaire.
Right. And, you know, Gene, a lot of times people ask this question, and do people of celebrity fame, power, and money get more special treatment or favorable treatment in the criminal justice system? My experience has been before they make an arrest, that may be because if you're doing your job correctly as a prosecutor and an officer, you got to dot I's and cross T's because you know people are going to say you only did it because I'm a high-powered person. But once they get brought into the system, I think that they get really hammered because alternatively, some prosecutors don't want to give it away, quote unquote, Jesse Smollett aside, because they don't want people to think that the rich and famous get more favorable treatment than the average Joe. So it's a double-edged sword in my mind. Let's listen, though, to a little bit more of the examination of this detective, and I'll come back with these two great guests because I got a lot of questions to ask about the legality of this warrant. All right, so there's the detective that's being cross-examined in the Robert Kraft Lee Wang case with regard to the installation of video recording devices inside of that massage parlor. Captain Jeffrey Paul, you not only were a person who, when you were just a detective, I don't mean just, but when you were a detective, you were actually doing these things. But then when you got later on in your career as a captain, you were actually running these operations. I just find that what's being said there, that, and you see in the back there, they have only option was to install these cameras. I don't know who put that up there, but is it the only option, Captain Paul?
No, in fact, I've never actually installed cameras in those facilities. I mean, we have done a ton of them. I know you're opposed to it, but we did do a lot of them for a lot of different reasons, and we've never had to install cameras. There's many ways. There's investigative techniques that you can certainly identify whether or not there's a illegal prostitution operation going on, and you can arrest those individuals that are soliciting prostitution without going as far as putting everyone under the microscope and potentially videotaping everyone that's going into those facilities. We have had many cases where legitimate customers go in to get massages and never engage in illegal activity.
Why would it be, or would it be, given today's technology, would you actually go to an assistant prosecutor, which is the way we would have to do it before you could go get a search warrant? You need to run that past a lawyer. I don't know what occurred here. Would you even think of asking an assistant prosecutor to have a videotaping recording equipment in a case of this low-level kind of offense?
Not in this case, no.
Yeah, Gene Rossi, to the law on that, I took a look at the affidavit, and interestingly, the affidavit refers to a case that they said they would comply with. It would appear from a lawsuit filed by John and Jane Doe's 31 individuals who were completely innocent. They did nothing wrong, but yet they were being videotaped and video recorded in various states of undress and even being naked. I find this to be a gross abuse of the Fourth Amendment in this way. That case that they cite told the judge that they would also take into consideration minimization. Talk to us about what minimization means, and apparently that did not occur if people are filing suits to say, I was videotaped doing nothing wrong, but I was naked. Come on.
Minimization is this. You have a wiretap. You're monitoring a phone, and the police get a search warrant, FBI, DEA, and you're telling the court, we're going to monitor these phone calls, but when they're talking to a priest, a rabbi, a spouse, or there's a conduct that is clearly not criminal, we're going to shut the wiretap off. And that's how it's approved. I got to tell you, this search warrant is so broad that it's going to fall outside that famous Leon case, the good faith case, because it just says, hey, we're going to videotape every customer regardless of whether they are engaging in criminal conduct. That is illegal, and that wide breadth of that search warrant can put the whole kick caboodle, if you will, out the window, and it could tube the case.
Gene Rossi, we are legal brothers from another mother, because I was saying this too and getting critiqued for it. The warrant requirement says particularly specify. And if you look at that warrant, it says any person, comma, believed to be engaged in criminal activity. Well, apparently, they didn't particularly describe it correctly. It was too broad, too sweeping, too overwhelming, and in fact, these people had done nothing wrong. And you know what? Legally, I don't know what's going to happen, although I suspect it could go either way. But as citizens of this country, what do we expect next? Being videotaped in states of disrobing with a doctor in a fitting room because they're trying to get a shoplifter? It's really offensive to me. I think they went too far. You should follow the Captain Jeff Paul manner of investigations if you want to do it right. But then the Kraft factor kicked in, and now the cops are on the crucible. We got to go to break. Don't go anywhere. More passion, more law, more crime, more Jeff Paul, more Gene Rossi. We'll be right back.